Hi, I'm Fergus Ryan, and I'm at the Cyber Policy Centre at ASPE, and I'm here today talking with Bryan. Well, Rod, why don't you tell me where you're from and what your organisation does?
I'm from KPMG, and I'm responsible for a practice called Solution 49X. We wanted a name that really described a difference in thinking, and 49X refers to the number of perfect numbers in the world. Currently there are 49 of them. There are millions of digits in number 49, and the first one is 6. I'll let people Google what a perfect number is. And interestingly, we had to put an X there because we know that one day the next discovery in terms of perfect numbers will be made, number 50. So we figured we can't keep changing the name, so we need to put an X there for our view to the future. The purpose of our practice is to look at leading digital technologies, cognitive systems, artificial intelligence, data and analytics, and to combine them into processes. So we're really process designers that use those tools, and we bring together the human element into that. So we're very interested in the behavioural sciences and how these technologies, when we're implementing them within corporations or government departments, how they actually allow us to augment what human facility is. And so it's both a tech group, a process group, and an anthropology group wrapped up in one.
So what is your view of when that next number is coming? How fast is all this technological change happening at the moment?
Well, perfect numbers are an interesting construct because they're very, very heavily processed, and so you need a huge supercomputer to do that, or peer-to-peer computers all lined up. We don't really know, but there's a suspicion. I mean, some people have a running bet on it that it might be, within the 18-month to 2-year period. It's something that we don't really know because the complexity of the algorithm itself. But one thing I would say is that the power of the analytics and cognitive capabilities that are coming to the market around AI and these sorts of technologies is moving incredibly quickly. It's something that we talk about with our clients quite readily, that in the old days you would buy technology that perhaps had a 5 to 7 year lifespan, and you just can't do that with these types of technology. They're moving so quickly. You're obsolete within a matter of 1 or 2 years with some of the tech. So a real change in thinking about how you procure it, how you use it, and how you take advantage of it.
Starting at a really macro level, how are these technological changes and the rapid rate of how things are moving, how is that changing the way the whole economy looks, and how are industries changing?
There's so much written about this fourth industrial revolution, which the WEF named, and it's fascinating in the sense that we're all looking forward. We all understand that there is going to be a disruption in terms of workforce, and people tend to fall on one side of the issue or the other, in the sense of it will take jobs, and we'll have to restructure society for a less employed workforce. I tend to be on the other side, which says there will be such an increase in new jobs that we just can't envisage, which has been proven in the third industrial revolution, that there's something to be really positive about, that we start doing the sorts of work that are far more engaging for humans, far more creative, thinking about potential new opportunities to use this tech. But of course, none of us really know where in 2025 we'll be. Certainly the economy will be in a different position as this takes hold.
So do you see more opportunities rather than challenges with these changes?
I wouldn't say I see more opportunities versus the challenges. I would say the challenge often is the opportunity, so they literally would be coming together. I think of it in terms of, like I said, it's a positive move in my view. I understand the people that have real concerns about automation. And of course that's going to impact not just blue collar workers, but now white collar workers. But of course, we don't know the new jobs that are going to be developed, and it's going to be a period of rapid change. But like I said, I'm actually quite buoyed by it. I think that we as human beings are ripe for this challenge, and we couldn't envisage, at any stage in history, you couldn't envisage the future other than in science fiction novels. And I remember when I was growing up, there were cartoons about the future with driverless cars. I don't know whether you read the press today, but in Phoenix, Arizona, the first driverless cars are out on the road without a backup driver in them. And so one of Google's offshoots, Waymo, has that. It's working, it's real. We don't see it here in Canberra or in the Australian major cities, but of course I think there's 2 driverless buses, one working in Perth, one working in Sydney. There may be some others, but this change is coming.
And so how is the rubber hitting the road right now when you talk to clients? How are they dealing with this change, and are they able to grapple with the enormous amount of data that a lot of businesses are now collecting?
Well, I think there's differing layers to answer that question. The first one is that there is always going to be a grapple around the issues of data simply because of volume, and it's ever increasing. The real, I think, fundamental driver, though, is not how we manage data, it's how we understand the insights that come from it, how we get value out of it. And different industries are finding value in different ways. It's still, I think, a fairly nascent issue to deal with. And what's interesting is if you ask clients that are at the more executive level, they see the strategic impost of this and the challenges associated with that. Obviously, as you come down in an organisation, they're far more driven by the task elements of how do we manage the data, how do we assure ourselves it's accurate, and those sorts of things. There's still a fairly big gap in terms of closing that capability so that it meets the strategic intent, and progress is probably quite slow compared to the amount of technology that's arriving into the marketplace which can assist in that. And one of the great issues here is organisations are often quite slow to adopt the technologies into their work processes, and that creates a challenge in its own right, and different industries are adopting at different pace.
How do you see workforces and then consumers dealing with these changes?
Well, the consumer adoption is really high. I mean, you only have to look at your own lifestyle. I mean, the chances were last night or the night before you probably watched something on streaming rather than from free-to-air TV. You were on your smartphone while you're in front of the television watching whatever you were watching. You're often buying online rather than just going down to the stores and wandering around. This change is quite phenomenal, and it's readily adoptable. And I think the issue here is that consumers adopt it far more quickly than many organisations' capacity to change to keep up. I know myself, if I'm looking for online purchases, of course I can go to eBay and Amazon.com, and obviously now coming to Australia. But I'm also buying from lots of small organisations, and before it would have been go to a big chain that sits in the local mall. This is incredible change, and I think that is driving companies to actually rethink some of their processes, like how do they market, how do they sell, how do they actually position themselves as adding a value when I'm making my decisions online.
We've got Amazon coming into the Australian market. Is the Australian retail market ready for that challenge?
I don't think it's an issue of ready. It's an interesting question because there's very much 2 sides to this. A lot of people see it as a threat, and some people think that it won't be as big a threat as it is. I actually tend to think that, as it will be. I tend to think that Amazon is going to be a threat because it's going to drive prices down. And what you'll find is that organisations that have products to sell in the same categories that Amazon will be introducing to the market, they will find that they have a new layer of competition and pricing, which means that when they look at their overall stock flow, they'll have to say, well, we'll drop those prices on other things that we sell simply to keep the revenue up. And I think that's going to create a disruption, so it'll be a balance issue. And so, for example, if you're a retailer that sells electronic goods as well as furniture, which there are some in the marketplace, as you know, once the price on electronic goods goes down because of the Amazon effect, what are they going to do? Well, the logical thing is that they'll have to increase the level of furniture sales, for example. And you could argue that good online sites are going to help that. I think that it's going to be very difficult for some of those organisations to keep the balance, because as we know, I mean, companies suffer when they lose a small percentage of their sales. They don't literally, it's very rare that somebody loses half their business. So it's going to be tight for them, is my view.
And finally, I just wanted to ask you about how we balance automation and the use of algorithms and big data, handing over a lot of responsibility to machines, in effect. How do we balance that with maintaining the human touch? And is there the possibility that we could be baking in some of our own biases into the algorithms that we're creating to analyse all this big data that we're collecting?
So there's two aspects to your question. The first is that any algorithm, whether it be one that's acquired or that's built, will have a bias in it, including AI. So we recognise that bias exists, and we have to cater for that. The second aspect is that these algorithms, where they augment capability rather than simply automate, I think that there is already adoption in terms of the workforce and the sorts of capabilities we can bring to bear. I think the bigger issue is organisations, in many instances, and it's a personal opinion, are rushing to automate. So it's not necessarily around algorithms, but around robotics, and that can include AI. And they're not giving thought to what the process intellectual capital is. It's interesting if you automate a process and then move away the people that understood that process, and you come back 18 months later, 2 years later, and you want to make a change, and you've got nobody that understood the complexity left in the organisation or available to say, what did we do there? And it's easy to talk about it in terms of, well, we go into the code and understand it. Actually, that's not that simple. So I think that lots of organisations are rushing to this as a cost mechanism without giving a great deal of thought to the long-term issues associated with how do you maintain these things? How do you actually do process change in the future? And how do you sustain the organisation as you want to modify it, make it more efficient, and adapt to new scenarios? The interesting thing here is that in the year 2000 and onwards, we talked about the spaghetti mess of core systems. Could we, and it's a very interesting question, be creating the spaghetti mess of automation in exactly the same way?
And do you think we are?
I absolutely think we are.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.